Across the polished hardwood floor, sunlight cuts through the wide windows, catching the faint shimmer of dust floating in the air. Balloons sway gently from the ceiling, their colors bright against the cream walls. A small blue frosted cake sits on the dining table, its candles still unlit, spelling out, "Happy first birthday, Eli." I watch as my son Eli giggles in his father's arms, his tiny hands reaching for the spinning ceiling fan above. It's a perfect moment, a scene that feels both fragile and full of hope. I take a deep breath, letting the warmth of this moment anchor me. It's been exactly a year since my life shattered, only to be rebuilt piece by painful piece. My name is Megan Lawson. I'm 30 years old, a mother, a wife, and a survivor of a kind of family betrayal that cuts deeper than any physical wound. It leaves marks on the heart and scars on the soul, the kind you don't see until you're standing in a hospital gown holding your newborn son, realizing the people you once loved are the ones who tried to break you. But before I tell you how I got here, you need to understand what came before. A year ago, I was 8 months pregnant, barely holding myself together at my sister's wedding. I walked into that hall swollen with life, my body heavy, my heart hopeful for a small sign that maybe my family still cared about me. I had no idea that day would change everything. 2 weeks before the wedding, a white silk envelope with gold lettering arrived in the mail. It was tied with a delicate blush ribbon, exactly the kind of extravagant touch my sister Claire loved. My husband Eric found it first, placing it gently on the kitchen table as I balanced a cup of tea against my round belly. "Are you sure you want to go?" Eric asked, concern etched into his eyes as I stared at the envelope. He knew my history with my family, the cold shoulders, the casual dismissals, the way my achievements were always shadowed by Claire's spotlight. But still, a small part of me hoped this would be different. Maybe this time they'd see me, really see me. I hesitated, my fingers tracing the soft ribbon. "I don't want to regret not going," I whispered. Eric reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "Then we go together," he said, his voice steady. "But if you feel even a little uncomfortable, we leave. No explanations, just say the word." The morning of the wedding, I slipped into a flowing navy blue gown that stretched over my round 36-week belly. It was the only dress I had that felt both elegant and breathable. I smoothed my hair, dabbed on some light makeup, and clipped on the small sapphire earrings Eric had gifted me for our anniversary. I looked tired but strong in the mirror, a woman who had endured more than her share of quiet heartbreaks. As we pulled up to the grand, ivy-covered estate where the ceremony was being held, that old familiar knot tightened in my stomach. The air was thick with the scent of fresh flowers and polished stone. I watched as guests in designer gowns and tailored suits flowed through the entrance, their laughter ringing out like champagne glasses clinking in the distance. "Just breathe," Eric whispered as he placed his hand on my leg, giving it a reassuring squeeze. I forced a small smile, trying to suppress the rising tide of anxiety. Inside the hall was breathtaking, a sea of white and gold crystal chandeliers reflecting in polished floors and massive floral arrangements lining the aisle. It was everything my sister had ever dreamed of, every detail, a testament to her need for perfection. We approached the reception desk where a young woman with a headset and a forced smile handed us a small envelope. Inside was a card with our table number scrawled in cursive, "Overflow seating." I felt my heart sink. Overflow, like we were an afterthought. Eric's jaw tightened, but he didn't say a word. He just gently guided me through the crowd to our designated table, tucked in the far corner of the ballroom, partially hidden behind a column next to the exit leading to the kitchen. I took a deep breath, settling into the stiff, uncomfortable chair. The tablecloth was slightly wrinkled, the silverware mismatched, and the centerpiece, a small wilting arrangement of roses, felt like a forgotten afterthought compared to the extravagant displays at the center tables. "It's fine," I whispered, forcing a small smile as Eric took his seat beside me. We knew this might happen. He reached for my hand under the table, his fingers warm and reassuring. "We don't have to stay long," he whispered back. his eyes scanning the room for signs of trouble. I squeezed his hand. "Let's just get through this." As the music swelled and the guests took their seats, I felt a strange mix of dread and determination settle over me. I had made it this far. I would see this through no matter what. But as the day unfolded, I would come to realize that my family had saved their worst for last. The ceremony itself felt like a scene from a high-budget movie: white roses, glass chandeliers, and violinists in the corners playing soft, classical music. The kind of place where every photo looks perfect, even if the people in them are far from it. I watched from my corner as my parents, Evelyn and Richard, glided through the crowd, their polished smiles gleaming as they soaked in the admiration of their wealthy friends. My sister Claire, the star of the day, floated down the aisle in a shimmering white gown that clung to her like it had been made from moonlight. She was radiant, flawless, and utterly indifferent to my presence. I tried not to take it personally. After all, this was her day, and I had long since accepted my role as the family's forgotten daughter, the one who had to claw for every ounce of attention only to be met with half-hearted applause. As the ceremony ended and the guests moved to the grand ballroom for the reception, I felt Eric's hand tighten around mine. He leaned in, whispering, "You okay?" I managed a small nod. "I'm fine, just a little overwhelmed." We found our way back to our corner table where the conversations around us buzzed with excitement about the ceremony, the dress, the vows. I sipped my water, the cool liquid doing little to soothe the growing ache in my back. I was 36 weeks pregnant, and my body was a constant reminder of how close I was to a whole new life. The speeches began, each one a carefully crafted performance. My father's booming voice echoed through the room as he raised his glass to toast his perfect daughter. My mother, her carefully painted face beaming, clutched her crystal flute like a prized possession. They praised Claire's beauty, her achievements, her bright future. They even managed to weave in a few jokes about her being the perfect bride and how her life would be filled with nothing but joy and success. Not a single mention of their other daughter. Not a word about the soon-to-be-born grandchild sitting at the corner table unnoticed and unimportant. Eric's jaw tightened beside me, his fingers curling into a fist. I placed my hand over his, giving it a gentle squeeze. I didn't need him to defend me. Not here, not now. Then came Claire's speech. She stood at the head table, her new husband beaming beside her. She took a deep breath, tears glistening in her perfectly lined eyes, and launched into a heartfelt monologue about the love of her life, her hopes for the future, and the family that had shaped her into the woman she was today. And then, with a perfectly rehearsed pause, she said it. "I want to thank my amazing parents for raising me to be the woman I am today, for teaching me strength, grace, and kindness, for always being there for me through every high and low, for making me their priority." The room erupted in applause. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. My father clinked his glass against Claire's, and I felt something inside me snap. Eric leaned in, his voice low and tight. "We don't have to stay." I shook my head, forcing a tight smile. "No, it's fine. I'll survive this." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and aching feet. I watched as my parents fawned over Claire as guests lined up to take pictures with the newlyweds as laughter echoed off the polished marble floors. I felt like a ghost floating through the crowd, my swollen belly a silent reminder that I existed even if no one seemed to notice. Finally, Eric whispered, "Let's get some air." I nodded, grateful for the excuse to escape the suffocating weight of my family's indifference. We slipped out onto the terrace where the night air was cool against my flushed skin. I leaned against the stone railing, staring out over the sprawling manicured gardens, their perfectly trimmed hedges and sparkling fountains. A stark contrast to the mess of emotions churning inside me. Eric wrapped his arms around my shoulders, pressing a gentle kiss to the side of my head. "You're stronger than anyone in that room," he murmured. "Don't forget that." I closed my eyes, letting his words wash over me, a small comfort in the face of so much hurt. As we stood there, the soft glow of the ballroom lights spilling out onto the terrace, I felt my son shift inside me, a gentle kick against my ribs. A reminder that I wasn't alone. That my family might have written me off, but I was building a new one that would never know the kind of pain and rejection I had endured. I took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill my lungs. Maybe one day I would confront my parents. Maybe one day I would tell them how much they had hurt me, but for now I would focus on the life growing inside me, on the love of the man standing beside me, and on the future we would build together one where I would never again feel like a forgotten daughter. I turned to Eric, my hand resting on my belly, and whispered, "Let's go home." And as we walked back through the echoing marble halls, past the laughing guests and the clinking glasses, I felt a strange, quiet strength rise within me. I might have been forgotten today, but I would never let myself be forgotten again. A few days after the wedding, the anger I had tried so hard to suppress began to simmer beneath the surface, like a pot left on a slow boil. I kept replaying my sister's speech in my mind, the way she had so casually erased me from her story, like I was an unwanted footnote in her otherwise perfect life. It was a rainy Thursday morning when I got the first text from my mother. I was sitting in the nursery folding tiny onesies and trying to organize the chaos of baby supplies we had piled up over the past few months. My phone buzzed on the edge of the crib, the harsh vibration breaking the quiet. "Mom, I hope you got home safely. Claire's wedding was beautiful, wasn't it?" I stared at the message, my fingers tightening around the soft yellow onesie in my hands. The words felt like a slap, a reminder that she had noticed me only enough to ensure I hadn't embarrassed the family by collapsing in a corner at 36 weeks pregnant. I took a deep breath, forcing my pulse to slow. I wasn't going to let her get to me, not this time. But then another message followed. "Mom, Claire mentioned you seemed a bit off. I hope you're not upset. You know how emotional you can get? It was her special day after all." I felt a sudden sharp pressure in my chest, like someone had punched the air out of my lungs. Emotional. That word again. The one they had used to dismiss me for years. Whenever I spoke up, whenever I showed even a hint of the hurt they caused, I was labeled the emotional one. The one who couldn't take a joke, the one who needed to lighten up. I tossed the onesie onto the pile beside me and reached for my phone, my fingers moving almost on their own. "Me, I'm fine. Mom, just tired. You know, being 36 weeks pregnant can do that to a person." I hit send, my heart pounding in my chest, and watched the 3 little dots appear on the screen as she typed back, "Mom. Of course, honey. Just try to rest. You'll need all your energy when the baby comes. And remember, family is everything. Don't hold grudges. It's not good for the baby." I let out a bitter laugh, the sound harsh in the quiet room. Family is everything. A phrase that felt more like a taunt than a comfort. Before I could spiral into another round of self-doubt, Eric's voice cut through my thoughts. "Hey, you okay?" He leaned against the doorframe, his eyes full of concern as he took in my clenched jaw and the phone still trembling in my hand. I forced a smile, tucking my phone into the back pocket of my jeans. "Yeah, just a little overwhelmed." He crossed the room in a few long strides, kneeling beside the crib and taking my hands in his. His touch was warm, grounding. "Talk to me." I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. How could I explain the tangled mess of anger, hurt, and betrayal I felt without sounding like the bitter, forgotten daughter my family had painted me as? Finally, I whispered, "I'm tired of being the one who always has to swallow the hurt, the one who has to smile and nod and pretend that everything is fine just to keep the peace." Eric's jaw tightened, his eyes darkening with a familiar anger. "You don't have to do that anymore. You have a family now. You have me, and soon you'll have our son. You don't owe them anything." His words settled into the cracks of my broken heart, a balm to the wounds I had carried for so long. I leaned into his chest, closing my eyes as he wrapped his arms around me, his heartbeat steady against my ear. For the first time in a long while, I felt a small, stubborn spark of strength ignite within me. Later that evening, as I lay in bed, my hand resting on my swollen belly, I made a silent promise to myself I would not raise my son in a world where he felt unseen or unloved. I would not allow him to grow up believing that he had to earn the love of the people who were supposed to protect him. I would break the cycle. A week later, the storm finally broke. It started with a single text from my sister Claire sent in the early hours of a Sunday morning. "Claire, I need to talk to you. Call me when you can." I stared at the message, the soft glow of my phone screen cutting through the darkness of our bedroom. Eric was still sleeping beside me, his breaths slow and steady, one arm draped protectively across my growing belly. I glanced at the clock, 2:17 a.m. Why would Claire be texting me now? She had made it clear at her wedding that my presence barely registered on her radar. I set my phone down, ignoring the gnawing curiosity, and tried to close my eyes, but sleep refused to return. After a few minutes, I sighed carefully, slipped out of bed, and padded down the hall to the kitchen. I needed a glass of water and a moment to clear my head. I was halfway through the kitchen doorway when my phone buzzed again. I grabbed it off the counter, my pulse quickening as I read the new message. "Claire, I really need to talk to you. It's important." I frowned, leaning against the cool marble countertop as I typed back, "Me, it's 2 a.m. Claire, what's going on?" The response came almost immediately. "Claire, I know you're mad at me, I get it, but this isn't about us. I just need your help." I felt a mix of irritation and curiosity tighten my chest. What on earth could she possibly need from me? The sister she had publicly humiliated. The one she had treated like a ghost at her own wedding. "Me, what do you need?" A few seconds later, my phone rang, the shrill sound cutting through the quiet kitchen. I hesitated for a moment before swiping to answer. "Claire." "Megan," she said, her voice shaky, edged with a panic. I hadn't heard from her since we were kids. I messed up. I leaned back against the counter, gripping the cold edge for support. What happened? There was a long, ragged breath on the other end of the line. Brandon's family found out about everything. I blinked momentarily, thrown. Everything. "About the money," she whispered, her voice cracking, "about the loans, about the wedding expenses. They're threatening to sue, to cut us off completely." I felt a small, dark thrill rise in my chest. Brandon's family was old money, the kind of wealthy that didn't tolerate scandals or financial missteps. If they had discovered that Claire had been quietly funneling funds from their joint accounts to cover her lavish wedding and designer lifestyle, the fallout would be catastrophic. I tightened my grip on the counter, a bitter smile creeping onto my lips. This was the same sister who had treated me like a disposable prop at her wedding, who had basked in the glow of our parents' praise while I sat in the shadows forgotten. "What do you want me to do about it?" I asked, my voice sharp. "I don't know," she snapped, the panic in her voice spiking. I don't know what to do. Mom and Dad don't understand. They keep telling me it will blow over, but it won't. Brandon's parents are serious. They're talking about getting lawyers involved, about cutting us off from the family trust. I closed my eyes, letting her words wash over me, each one a small, delicious victory. "And you want me to fix this?" I said, my tone icy. There was a long, desperate pause. I could almost see her standing in her pristine, white-tiled kitchen, her perfect world crumbling around her. "Please, Megan," she whispered. "I need your help. You're the only one I can trust." The irony of her words almost made me laugh. The only one she could trust. The sister she had ignored, belittled, and humiliated for years. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This was it, my moment of reckoning. "I'll think about it," I said finally, my voice calm. "But don't expect me to clean up your mess without consequences. Claire, I'm not your safety net." She let out a shaky breath, a small, pathetic sound that stirred no sympathy in me. "Thank you," she whispered, the relief in her voice palpable. "I owe you." I ended the call without another word, the screen going dark in my hand as I stood there breathing heavily in the quiet kitchen. I felt my son kick sharply, as if sensing the storm that was about to break. I rested a hand on my belly, feeling the strong, insistent push of tiny feet against my palm. "Don't worry, little one," I whispered, a fierce protective fire igniting in my chest. "Your mom's not letting anyone push her around anymore." I stood there for a long moment, letting the silence wrap around me. A small, grim smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. I might not have been the favored daughter, the perfect sister, or the golden child. But I was something far more dangerous now, a woman who had nothing left to lose. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't the one chasing after my family's approval. I wasn't the forgotten daughter, the silent shadow at family gatherings. I was the one they needed now, and I planned to make the most of it. I shuffled into the kitchen, my bare feet cool against the polished wood floors, and found Eric already up, his laptop open on the kitchen island as he sipped his morning coffee. He looked up as I entered, his eyes softening as he took in my messy hair and swollen belly. "Morning, beautiful," he said, leaning over to kiss my cheek as I poured myself a glass of water. "Morning," I murmured. Sliding onto the stool beside him, I hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "Claire called me last night." His expression immediately darkened, his jaw tightening as he set down his mug. "What did she want?" "She's in trouble," I said, my fingers tracing the cool, smooth edge of my glass. "Financial trouble. Brandon's family found out about some shady loans she took out for the wedding, and they're threatening to cut her off." Eric let out a low, humorless chuckle, shaking his head. "Of course, she wants you to bail her out." Unbelievable. I met his eyes, feeling a small, fierce smile creep onto my lips. "I'm not bailing her out. But I am going to make her pay for every snub, every cold shoulder, every backhanded comment she's thrown my way over the years." He leaned back, folding his arms across his chest, a hint of pride flickering in his eyes. "I'm listening." I took a slow, measured breath, my mind already spinning with possibilities. "First, I'm going to make it clear that I'm not her personal problem solver. If she wants my help, she's going to have to earn it. And second," I paused, letting the words hang in the air for a moment, savoring the power I felt growing inside me. "I'm going to make sure she never forgets who she tried to cross." Eric's eyes sparkled with a mix of admiration and curiosity. "What do you have in mind?" I felt a rush of adrenaline, a fierce protective instinct that pulsed through my veins like a heartbeat. "I'm going to make her remember that I'm not just her sister. I'm a mother now, and no one messes with my family." That afternoon, as I sat on the couch with my feet propped up and a cup of chamomile tea steaming in my hands, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Claire. "Claire, I'm serious, Megan. Please, I need your help." I smirked, my thumb hovering over the screen for a moment before I typed back. I'll meet you tomorrow. My place, noon, and bring everything. Bank statements, loan documents, everything." The response came almost immediately. "Claire, thank you. I owe you big time. I promise I'll make this right." I set my phone down, leaning back against the plush couch cushions as my son shifted inside me. A slow, rolling movement that made my breath catch for a moment. I rested my hand on my belly, feeling the soft, steady pulse of life beneath my palm. "Don't worry, little one," I whispered. "Mommy's got this." The next day, I made sure the house was spotless. I wanted Claire to feel every inch of the life I had built without her, without my parents, without the constant judgment and dismissal that had defined my childhood. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, arranged a tray of snacks on the kitchen island, and set out a stack of neatly organized folders on the dining table, each one containing every piece of financial evidence I had quietly gathered over the past few years. By noon, I heard the sharp staccato sound of Claire's high heels clicking up the front steps. I took a deep breath, smoothing my hair back and adjusting the loose, comfortable dress that stretched over my belly. I opened the door just as she reached for the bell, her perfectly manicured hand hovering in midair. She looked up, her eyes widening slightly as she took in my calm, composed expression. "Megan," she said, forcing a tight, brittle smile. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." I stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. "Come in." She hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking around the warm, sunlit interior of my home before stepping across the threshold. I closed the door behind her, the soft, decisive click of the latch echoing through the quiet foyer. "Coffee?" I asked, gesturing to the steaming pot on the counter. She glanced at the tray of snacks, the neatly folded napkins, the soft, inviting glow of the kitchen, and for a brief, satisfying moment, I saw a flicker of uncertainty cross her perfectly painted features. Sure, she said, setting her designer handbag on the counter as she slid onto a bar stool. I poured her a cup, sliding it across the smooth granite surface with a small, tight smile. So, I said, leaning against the counter and folding my arms across my chest. Tell me what's going on. She took a shaky breath, wrapping her long, slender fingers around the warm ceramic mug Brandon's family found out about the loans I took out for the wedding. They're furious. They said I've betrayed their trust, and they're threatening to cut us off from the family trust. I raised an eyebrow, suppressing the urge to smirk. And you want me to help you fix this? She nodded, her eyes wide and desperate, her perfectly lined lips trembling slightly. Yes, I know I've been a terrible sister. I know I've hurt you, but I need your help. Megan, please. I took a slow, measured sip of my tea, letting the bitter herbal warmth wash over my tongue as I considered her words. Finally, I set my cup down, meeting her wide, pleading eyes with a steady, unblinking stare. I'll help you, Claire, I said, my voice cool and even. But this time it's going to cost you. Claire blinked, her perfectly lined eyes narrowing slightly as she processed my words. Cost me? What do you mean? I leaned back against the kitchen counter, crossing my arms over my chest. I'm not just talking about money, Claire. I'm talking about respect, about accountability, about finally treating me like the sister you claim to care about, not just a convenient safety net. She opened her mouth to protest, but I held up a hand, silencing her before she could start her usual routine of half-hearted apologies and self-pity. Sit down, I said, gesturing to the dining table where I had neatly arranged a stack of folders. We're doing this my way. She hesitated for a moment, her perfectly manicured nails tapping nervously against the side of her coffee mug before sliding off the bar stool and following me to the table. She sank into one of the chairs, her spine straight, her shoulders tense, the picture of a woman on the edge. I took a seat across from her, my fingers tracing the edge of the top folder as I met her wide, anxious eyes. First, I said, flipping open the folder and pulling out a neatly printed document we're going to talk about the loans. Her face paled slightly, her hands clenching in her lap. I pulled your credit reports. I continued, sliding the papers across the table. And your bank statements. You've been using Brandon's family money to cover personal expenses for months, designer clothes, luxury spa trips, extravagant dinners. She flinched, her eyes darting to the incriminating pages in front of her. I don't know how you thought you could hide this, I said, leaning back in my chair, my fingers tapping a slow, steady rhythm against the edge of the table. Did you really think they wouldn't notice when the balances started dropping, or when the family accountant flagged the withdrawals? She opened her mouth, her face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and anger, but I cut her off again, my voice sharp. I'm not here to clean up your mess. Claire, I'm here to set some boundaries. If you want my help, you're going to have to earn it. Her jaw tightened, her eyes hardening into a familiar, defiant glare. For a moment, I saw the spoiled, entitled sister I had grown up with, the one who had always taken without a second thought, who had always assumed I would be there to pick up the pieces when her world fell apart. What do you want from me? She snapped, her voice sharp, her cheeks flushed with indignation. I smiled, a slow, satisfied curve of my lips that seemed to unnerve her even more. First, I said, my voice calm and measured, you're going to apologize, not just to me, but to Eric, for the way you treated us at your wedding, for the way you've treated me our entire lives. She stiffened, her eyes flashing with a mix of anger and shame. And then I continued, leaning forward, my fingers laced together on the polished wood of the dining table. You're going to make this right. You're going to pay back every cent you took from Brandon's family, and you're going to do it without dragging me into your mess. Her eyes widened, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, gasping for air. But I can't. I don't have that kind of money, she sputtered, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the soft flesh of her palms. I shrugged, my expression cold. Then you'd better figure it out. Because if you don't, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are. I'm going to make sure Brandon's family cuts you off for good. And I'm going to make sure our parents finally see you for the selfish, manipulative person you've always been. She stared at me, her face a mask of shock and betrayal, her carefully constructed facade cracking at the edges. "You wouldn't," she whispered, her voice trembling. I leaned back, crossing my arms over my chest as I met her desperate, pleading gaze. "Try me." There was a long, heavy silence, the air between us thick with unspoken words, with years of resentment and unacknowledged pain. Finally, she slumped back in her chair, her shoulders sagging, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Fine," she whispered, her voice hollow. "I'll do it. I'll pay it back. I'll apologize. I'll make it right." I felt a small, fierce thrill of victory pulse through my veins, a quiet, satisfying sense of power that I hadn't felt in years. "Good," I said, pushing the stack of documents across the table toward her. "Then you can start by signing these." She blinked, her trembling fingers reaching for the neatly printed contracts I had prepared the night before. Legal agreements carefully drafted to ensure that she would repay every cent she owed with interest over the next 5 years. Her eyes scanned the pages, her lips moving silently as she read through the harsh, unforgiving terms, her face growing paler with each line. This is too much," she whispered, her voice breaking. I leaned forward, my fingers tapping a slow, steady rhythm against the polished wood. "No, Claire," I said, my voice low and firm. "This is exactly what you deserve." For a long, tense moment, she sat there, her head bowed, her shoulders shaking as the weight of her own actions settled onto her narrow, designer-clad shoulders. And then slowly, she reached for the pen beside the stack of papers, her fingers trembling as she scrawled her signature across the dotted line. When she looked up, her eyes were red, her cheeks streaked with silent tears, her carefully painted mask finally shattered. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice small and broken. I'm sorry." I felt a strange, bittersweet ache swell in my chest, a mix of triumph and grief, of anger and relief. "I know," I whispered, my voice soft but unyielding, "but that doesn't change what you did." She nodded her head, bowed, her fingers still clenched around the pen as she pushed the signed documents back across the table toward me. I took them, slipping them back into the neat, orderly folder with a small, satisfied smile. "Now," I said, standing and reaching for the door. "Get out of my house." Story 2. Hi there. I'm 34 years old and go by Olivia. I work as the finance director for a tech business and reside in Denver, Colorado. People frequently believe that I have it all together: a steady job, no children, and sufficient funds for investments or travel. They fail to see how frequently I've been the bank, the fixer, and the assistance in my family. However, I never thought that the individuals I continued to stand by would turn out to be the ones who betrayed me so severely. One beautiful weekend in late April was the beginning of it all. In San Diego, my younger brother Liam was getting married. The event was placed on a gorgeous beach. Twinkle lights stretched over palm trees, white linen seats, gentle waves, and a soft blue sky. Visitors danced barefoot on the sand, laughed, and posed for pictures. You'd never know I had provided the majority of the funding for the entire setup. My parents were retired and on limited incomes, and Liam and his fiancée had recently paid off their college debts. So without hesitation, I jumped in. I covered the cost of the flowers, the meals, the venue deposit, and even the photographs. Liam and his new bride were commended by everybody for organizing such a beautiful wedding. My name is not mentioned. It didn't bother me. I told myself I didn't. However, it was after all family. Ryan, my boyfriend, flew from Denver to join me. Even though we hadn't formally planned to be married yet, we both understood where we were going after 2 years of dating. He witnessed my generosity toward my family, and more significantly, my lack of reciprocation. He never pushed, though. He gave me the freedom to realize things on my own time the night before the wedding. Following the last dance, I stood at the venue's edge, feeling the ocean wind caress my skin as I held my sandals. "Thanks for everything, Liv," Liam murmured, giving me a hard embrace. "You truly delivered." I clasped his hand and grinned, but I felt a slight pang at the back of my chest. It had nothing to do with gratitude. Being noticed was the goal. Ryan and I went back to the motel that evening. We were so happy that we fell asleep in one other's arms after discussing the wedding and laughing about the aunt who sobbed too much during the vows. While I was falling asleep, I was unaware that a terrible event was already happening. Something that would completely alter the situation. Ryan and I were checking out of the motel early the next morning. I was looking through my phone to get the hotel reservation after tossing my duffel bag over my shoulder when I made the decision to launch my banking app. Before leaving for the airport, a brief inspection. My throat tightened and my fingers became rigid at what I saw. There has been a significant decline in my account balance. It was $19,000 lower. In the midst of the hotel lobby, I froze. Carts sliding across tile floors, people sweeping past me, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. It all went away. Unable to blink, my eyes were fixed on the screen. "What is it?" Wheeling our bags behind me, Ryan asked. I took a while to respond. My lips were parched. I murmured, nearly whispering, "Ryan, the $19,000 is gone." He grabbed my phone out of my grasp and began looking through the transaction history. "Have you lately made any significant transfers?" We both knew the answer when he asked. I had more than $28,000 in my checking account only last week. Since then, I had not made any significant purchases. He scrolled through the past, and I watched. He clenched his jaw. He tilted the screen and said, "Here, take a look. 3 changes. Last night, everything was finished in a single minute. Jenna Collins received $6,000, $7,000 to Scott Collins. Marcia Green was paid $6,000. They were all recorded as Zelle transfers at 10 to 47 p.m. I gasped. I answered slowly. I was in the shower at that time. Following the ceremony, Ryan turned to face me with a solemn gaze. "I take it you didn't mail these?" "No, not at all." "Then," he added bluntly, "someone used your phone. Both your password and your app were accessible to them." As soon as we entered the elevator, my legs began to wobble. I tried to quiet the noise in my ears by leaning against the mirrored wall. I had always been the assist, sending money without asking, paying the bills, and purchasing the last-minute airline tickets. However, it didn't help. It was stealing. Worst of all, I already knew who was responsible. My phone rang as soon as we entered the hotel foyer. Her mother was the one I responded after taking a deep breath. I tried not to tremble when I said, "Mom, I have a question for you," as if she were in the kitchen with someone else. There was a lull on the other end of the line, followed by distant talk and the sound of clinking dishes. Her voice was informal, even upbeat. "Good morning, my love. Is everything all right?" Last night, 3 sizable transactions were made to my bank account, which I swallowed. "To you, Scott and Jenna. Are you familiar with that?" She really giggled, after another pause, as if I had just recalled her of something funny. "Oh, that I wanted to know when you would notice." To be honest, it wasn't as much as I had anticipated. My heart stopped beating. "What are you saying?" "According to Jenna, keeping so much in your account was wasteful," breezily, she remarked. "So we divided it. Consider it Liam's wedding present." I was immobile as I stood still in the hotel lobby. Nothing caught their attention. I had ringing in my ears while I was taking a shower. "You stole my phone." My voice cracked as I asked. "Oh, Olivia, don't be so dramatic. You're not dating, doing well. No children. You ought to lend a hand. That's the role of family." Ryan moved in closer and removed the phone from my grasp. Calmly but firmly, he said, "Ma'am, you just acknowledged committing a crime. It is theft to take money out of someone else's account without their consent." She lost her temper. "Do you enjoy interfering in family affairs, or are you now a lawyer?" I reclaimed the phone. I said, "Mom," in a softer tone. "Who sent those transfers after stealing my phone, Jenna?" Without embarrassment, she answered. She guessed her password. "It wasn't hard. Something about your old cat, right?" And then she hung up. I stared at the blank screen in disbelief. The woman who had raised me had just laughed in my face after helping herself to my life savings. It wasn't just betrayal. It was bold, unapologetic theft from the people I had trusted the most. Ryan took my hand gently but firmly. "We're not letting this go." And neither was I. We didn't even stop to breathe after the call ended. I told Ryan I wanted to speak to them in person. I needed to see their faces. When I asked them why he didn't question me, he just nodded and drove us to my mother's house. The drive through the San Diego suburbs felt surreal. The sun was out. Birds chirped and the sky was the same soft blue from the wedding, but I felt nothing. It was like I had been scooped out from the inside before we could ring the bell. The door opened. Jenna stood there in a tank top and yoga pants holding a coffee mug. She gave me a half smile like I was early for brunch. "Oh, Olivia, you came back." I walked right past her inside. My mother, Marcia, was sitting in the living room sorting through Liam's wedding photos. Scott, Jenna's husband, had his feet on the coffee table sipping espresso like it was Sunday morning and nothing had happened. "We need to talk," I said, standing firm in the center of the room. Marcia looked up calmly about the money. "Yes," I said, my voice sharp. "I want to know who gave you the right to go into my bank account and take $19,000. Jenna shrugged and plopped onto the couch. "You should have used a better password. Mr. Whiskers was too easy." She laughed like it was a joke. Scott chuckled. "I told her not to do it, but she said you wouldn't care. You think I wouldn't care?" My fists clenched, my voice was rising. "You took $19,000 from me while I was in the shower. You didn't ask, you didn't even hint, you just helped yourselves." Marcia stood slowly, setting down the photo album. "Olivia, don't blow this out of proportion. It was for Liam's wedding." "You're not dating, you make good money. Liam, starting a new life. Families help each other." "Helping means I agreed to it." I snapped. "What you did was theft." Jenna rolled her eyes. "We didn't ask because you always act generous but never really give." "We're tired of begging," Scott added with a smirk. "You still have $9,000 left. We didn't clean you out. That was it." My voice dropped to a cold whisper. "You didn't just take my money. You stole my trust." The room fell silent. Then Marcia's face twisted. "How dare you speak to me like that?" she shouted, and before I could react, she raised her hand and slapped me across the face. The sound rang through the room like thunder. Ryan was on his feet in an instant, grabbing my arm and stepping in front of me. "Enough," he snarled, turning toward Marcia. "Touch her again, and you'll deal with the cops." I stood there, my cheek burning, my heart pumping, my head blank. That smack didn't simply hurt my skin. It broke any notion I had left of this being a misunderstanding. It wasn't. They understood exactly what they were doing. I looked around at the three of them. Now, it's not only that I added, "It's assault," and I turned and went out the door, this time without looking back. We drove back to the motel in quiet. I clutched Ryan's hand the entire time, but I couldn't talk. My cheeks still ached from the slap. But what stung more was the icy certainty creeping inside me. This wasn't a moment of crazy. I had never wanted to acknowledge this trend. I was worn out beyond repair by the time we touched down in Denver that night. I refrained from unpacking. I neglected to check my email. My thoughts were racing as I sat on the couch and gazed at the floor. I opened my laptop the following afternoon and started retrieving bank statements. I wanted evidence, but I convinced myself it was simply curiosity. Evidence that I wasn't thinking this, that the awful night wasn't unique. One bad decision made by Marcia or Jenna. I had to confront the reality that I had been evading for years. I began underlining each financial transaction pertaining to my family after printing out my statements. For Jenna and Scott, red. For Marcia, blue. Liam is represented by yellow line by line, month after month. The pile of papers on my dining table soon became substantial. I've transferred just over $42,000, $40 over the last 3 years, which includes $2,000 for rent, tuition assistance, vehicle repairs, medical crises, birthday parties, Christmas gifts, roof leaks, and missing phones till payday. Only this once. There was never a single instance. Each time I paused, guilt was placed on top like icing. We are related, Olivia. You're doing well. You're not having any difficulties. You have no children at all. You don't really need the money. They had convinced me I believed I was being responsible, kind, and encouraging. I hadn't been helpful, though. I had been giving in. Jenna contacted me crying at the time, claiming that her daughter Madison had broken her arm and they were unable to pay for it. In the midst of my workday, I sent $1,500. I later discovered that everything was covered by insurance. Jenna had utilized the funds to make a down payment on Scott's new iPhone. While I marked another transaction, Ryan took a seat next to me. Have any food today? I gave a head shake. I'm not hungry. Take a look at this. I've been treated like an ATM by them. I couldn't see it since I'm blind. He removed one of the pages from my grasp with gentleness. You weren't blind. You made an effort to adore them. I didn't respond. I was unable to. Then he inquired in a low voice. Have you considered doing something? I paused. I answered slowly. If a stranger had taken $19,000 out of my account, I would file a report. He gave a nod. Why not right now, then? My palm clenched around the highlighter as I gazed at the pages. Why not? Yes. I sat in front of my laptop the following morning and gazed at the document I had named The Truth. It included all of the money I had donated to my family over the previous 3 years together, with the dates, amounts, screenshots, and text exchanges. It was less like a family history and more like a criminal report. Beside me, Ryan set down a cup of tea. He whispered softly, You don't have to do this today. I said, Yes, I do. I will never take a stance if I don't do so now. Without another word, he nodded. I gave a former coworker of mine who is now employed at a law firm that focused on financial matters. A call, she put me in touch with Tina Hargrove, an experienced officer in the Family Financial Crimes Unit at the Colorado Office for Financial Crimes. Olivia Brooks. Miss, later that afternoon when I got to the workplace, Tina asked. She was calm in her 40s with piercing, observant eyes that were framed by no-nonsense glasses. Yes, I do need to report anything. It seems to me that family members are engaging in financial exploitation. Calmly, she remarked. Let's sit down. I spent about an hour explaining everything to her. The $19,000 moves from my phone to Liam's wedding, the smack. Then came the years of guilt-tainted manipulation and unpaid loans. Tina took notes without speaking, only stopping to pose direct, focused queries. Finally, she inquired, Have you got proof? Ryan handed over the folder we had brought after opening it. Bank records, logs are transferred, text screenshots, audio recording of the altercation at Marcia Green's residence. Tina turned the file over. Her eyes narrowed a little, but her face remained the same. It's not unusual, she said. It's rare to hear someone actually speak up. I gave a nod. I believed for a long time that the peaceful course of action was to remain silent. However, if you are the only one experiencing pain, it is not peace. She returned the nod. We'll start a preliminary inquiry. We are going to check the transactions. Obtain digital logs, monitor the IP addresses used for the transfers, and speak with the participants. We will forward any evidence of unlawful access and intent to the district attorney. I paused. Are they going to be taken into custody? It depends, Tina answered. Yes, if intent is established and the case proceeds. However, there will be legal repercussions in either case. Ryan grabbed my hand as we got up to go. I was trembling a little, but not because I was afraid. Not against strangers, but against my own kin. I had just begun a legal war. However, I felt no remorse. I felt prepared. The word quickly got around. I was still throwing in bed when I received the first message early the next morning. Crimson Eyes. After a restless night, Marcia, Mom, Olivia, what are you doing? Did you actually report this? Call me immediately. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed incessantly. Text after text from Jenna Scott and even a couple from Liam. But his tone was tentative, apprehensive. But Jenna and Scott, their words were poisonous. Jenna, are you out of your mind? You're attempting to send your whole family to jail over a few $1,000. You're really self-centered. Scott Madison's life is being ruined by you. The children don't matter to you. I reared you, Marcia. And now you're betraying your own family. You're heartless. I silently gazed at my phone. The word sorry did not appear in any of the messages. Not a single acknowledgement of their actions. Only guilt-anger charges. Ryan entered the room with 2 coffee mugs in his hands. He lit up in my hand as he glanced at the television. I nodded. Still blaming you. I feel as though I have betrayed them. He removed the phone from my hand and sat next to me. Olivia, you didn't betray them. You were betrayed by them. They're not upset with you because of your wrongdoing. They're upset because you refused to be used by them for the first time. Nothing struck as deeply as it. I recalled how fast they twisted and how many times I had hesitated before delivering money. Family is meant to assist. You're not having any difficulties. Why are you so self-centered then? If it wasn't vital, we wouldn't inquire. However, it never happened once. Furthermore, it was never reimbursed. My phone called once more that afternoon. Something told me I had to confront it even though I almost let it go to voicemail. I replied. Marcia's tone was piercing. Her voice was angry. Olivia, you have let me down. When people learn that you are taking your family to court, what will they think? Your own blood is being humiliated. I shut my eyes. I could still feel the burn of her palm on my cheeks. You stole my money. Mom, without my consent. You gave me a smack. You're behaving as though that's typical. You've had enough. She let out a bark. You have no children at all. You didn't care about that money. I spoke steadily. Nobody is entitled to take simply due to their assumption that I can afford it. You didn't inquire. You took something that smack too. It was assault. She cautioned, you're forcing yourself out of this family. If you find yourself alone, don't blame me. I inhaled deeply. When the line was crossed, everyone made their decision. Finally, I'm sketching it. The line died. There was uneasy stillness for 3 days. Then one gloomy day, my Denver apartment's windows were stained by light rain. The doorbell rang. Ryan raised his head from his computer. Did you have any expectations? I went to respond to it after shaking my head. I recognized the person standing on the porch through the glass, crammed hands into jacket pockets, hunched shoulders staring at the ground. Liam. I carefully opened the door. Hello. Uncertain of what to anticipate, I said. His expression was a combination of regret and shame as he glanced up. May I enter? Only for a few minutes. After a moment of hesitation, I moved aside. We sat at the dining table where thick, color-coded tiles still held my financial records. Liam gave them a quick look but held his tongue. Between us, the air seemed thick. Are you doing all right? Gently, he inquired. I'm making it flatly, I replied. You're aware of what's happening. He gave a nod. Yes, I do. I finally understand everything. I simply had no idea what to do. Liam, why are you here? I folded my arms and asked. He inhaled deeply. Because I have to be honest with you, I was unaware that your phone would be taken that evening. I didn't ask them to. However, I have witnessed it occur before. I squinted. What are you saying? Last year, I heard Jenna and Scott discussing ways to borrow from you without causing you any trouble. I noticed my mother making a list, back-to-school birthdays, holidays, and deciding what to ask for and when. And I said nothing. I did not want to get expelled. I recently became a parent. I felt afraid. I remained silent. I was too shocked. Liam's eyes were sparkling as he glanced up at me. However, Mom ordered me to keep quiet when you filed a report. She advised me to claim ignorance if I were summoned to court. Olivia, I can't do that. Not to you no more. My vision was obscured by tears. Do you intend to testify? He gave a nod. I'll share all I know with the court. I'll explain that it wasn't a coincidence, it was prearranged. Additionally, it has been going on for years. I grabbed his hand from the other side of the table. Are you certain? This implies that they will also turn against you. You know. I understand, Liam answered. However, truth is what I would pick if I had to choose. You are my choice. On a soggy Monday morning, the preliminary hearing was set to take place in the Jefferson County Courthouse. I was driven there in quiet by Ryan. I clutched a folder containing printouts, proof, and agony as I sat in the passenger seat. My heart felt like it would burst when we walked into the courtroom. Jenna and Scott, who were wearing business casual, sat rigidly across the aisle with expressionless faces. They refused to look at me. Marcia, my mother, wasn't present. In order to conveniently escape taking responsibility for her actions, she had filed a legal excuse claiming that she was ill. However, Liam was present. He took a seat next to me, stable yet stiff shoulders. For a moment, I touched his knee. He breathed gently as he nodded. The judge came in. In her 60s, the Honorable Judge Nora Higgins was a perceptive woman with short gray hair and an attention-grabbing manner. The courtroom became silent as she said preliminary evidence in case number 8826B is being heard today. The accusations include 1 count of violent assault asset theft and improper access to a personal bank account. The final portion was for the smack indeed. Everything was set forth by the prosecution. The unlawful access via my stolen phone and the financial transfers, voice memos, screenshots, statements, and years of unpaid money. Liam's time came next. He approached the witness box at a leisurely pace. His voice was steady, yet his outfit was a little crumpled. He remarked, "At first, I didn't want to believe what was happening. However, I did see it. Olivia, my sister, was being exploited rather than assisted, utilized." He claimed to have overheard Scott and Jenna discussing how to approach people for money without raising suspicions. He mentioned our mother's financial asset calendar. He also acknowledged that he was aware that Jenna had figured out my password years prior. She boasted about it several times. He then gave the judge a direct look and stated something that will always stick in my memory. I was afraid, so I said nothing. But I'm over my fear. Money wasn't the only factor here. They gained her trust and never expressed regret. They simply had higher expectations. There was silence in the room. Judge Higgins silently observed him while tapping her pen on her folder. "Squeeze my hand, Ryan." I stood next to Liam in the corridor after the hearing was over. "Are you all right?" He gave a nod. Today, I lost them. "No, you still have me," I muttered, meeting his gaze. "And I'm proud of you for the first time in my life." I went back to the Jefferson County Courthouse for the final decision a week later. I walked through the courthouse doors holding Ryan's hand while wearing a plain blue dress. Scott and Jenna were already sat inside, their body language tight, but their faces blank. Once again, Marcia was nowhere to be found. It should come as no surprise when Judge Nora Higgins arrived in the courtroom and immediately got to work. The court has examined every piece of evidence that was presented. Unauthorized bank transactions, text message records, Mr. Liam Brooks's witness statements, and the audio recording made at the defendant's home. Marcia Green's physical attack during the altercation is one example of this. I took a deep breath. The smack had not been forgotten, even without Marcia Justice's memory, was longer than my family anticipated. The defendants, Jenna Collins and Scott Collins, are found guilty by the court of unlawfully accessing and stealing $19,000 worth of personal property. The plaintiff's bodily ailments and mental distress are also acknowledged by the court judge. Higgins resumed one after adjusting her spectacles. Jenna and Scott Collins have been placed on supervised probation for 3 years. 2. They have 90 days to pay back Miss Olivia Brooks the entire $19,000. 3. Miss Marcia Green receives an extra $6,000 in emotional damages. Despite being absent, he was fined $2,000 and found guilty of violent assault. In addition, she receives a 6-month suspended prison sentence and obligatory anger management therapy. 5. All 3 are the subject of a 5-year restraining order. By every means, Jenna Scott and Marcia are avoiding communication with Olivia Brooks. 6. The defendants are responsible for paying all court fees. There was silence in the room. Jenna's face went pallid as a ghost. Their lawyer turned his head away as Scott said something to him. I was paralyzed by the odd, silent weight of justice finally sinking in, not by terror. Liam put his hand on my shoulder. You succeeded. Ryan leaned closer. You did more than simply safeguard your finances. You kept your peace. I carefully rose up, taking one last look around the courtroom. I felt like the accused when I first arrived here. Not sure, sentimental, torn. Now, however, I held my head high. My family was broken by me. They broke themselves. I just decided to stop being a quiet victim. When we left the courthouse, I hardly noticed that the steps were slippery from the melting rain. Now the world felt altered. It's not softer, clearer, but not easier. I sat on the couch the same evening, wrapped in a blanket, and I stared at my phone, which was muted. Since the verdict, I hadn't switched it on, but curiosity finally got the better of me. I woke it up to a fresh text from an unknown number, hundreds of missed calls, and a few voicemails. Do you believe you have won? We will not bow down. I didn't have to see where it came from. Without hesitation, I erased it. 3 weeks went by without incident. After the court documents were detected in his employer's background check, Scott was fired. A court ruling frozen Jenna and Scott's joint accounts. Then their home was put into foreclosure. Liam sent me a text. I wanted to let you know that they failed to make 2 mortgage payments. Madison's enrollment was canceled by her school because of her late tuition. They're disintegrating. Calmly, I read it. No retribution, no satisfaction, just the facts. Getting caught up. I didn't recognize the woman who left me a voicemail a few days later. Hello, I'm Teresa. On the forum, I read your essay. For 30 years, I have been providing for my daughter financially. I used to believe that I was simply being a good mother. I became aware that I wasn't being kind after reading your tale. They were controlling me. Thank you. I hit play once more. Tears are streaming down my face. I felt less alone for the first time in years. There were more messages. Emails from unidentified people, ladies' men, even a writer's guy. Thank you, Olivia. I ultimately quit donating $500 a month to my unemployed brother because of you. I feel free at last, even if he labeled me callous. Every message lessened the burden I had been bearing for so long. Ryan, meantime, became my silent rock. I never felt compelled to forgive him. He never attempted to ease my suffering. He simply remained. I was watering our balcony's small herb garden one evening. He carried a little navy blue velvet box and 2 glasses of red wine outdoors. He remained silent. He said, I thought I'd wait. But then I understood that you are the one person I want to spend the rest of my life with. A plain platinum ring with a solitary diamond was within. It was not ostentatious. It was not ostentatious. It was flawless. Yes, I muttered. That year, spring arrived slowly. Mornings were gentle and blossoming as the snow melted. And on one of those days near Seward Lake, beneath a canopy of cherry blossoms, I headed toward the man who never left my side, down a plain white road bordered with flowers. In a little ceremony, Ryan and I were married. No big guest list, no dazzling lights, only those who were important. The mother of Liam, Ryan. When my own family failed to support me, Helen, his sister Maya, and a few close friends did. As if to bless us, the sun streamed through the trees. Liam's voice quiver as he approached to speak. At one point, I kept quiet out of fear of losing my family. However, I learned from my sister Olivia that true family does not instill fear. They don't exploit your generosity. They guard it. He held his glass out to me. You have my admiration. It is a privilege for me to be your brother. My cheeks started to water, but not from suffering, but from recovery. I saw something significant as I looked around. I had not lost any relatives. I had just created room for people who loved me and let go of those who never did. I was drinking tea and looking at our wedding photo by the window when we got home that evening. In my own eyes, I noticed something I hadn't seen in a while, and Ryan's grin in the picture seemed like the gentlest promise. Calm. I wrote my first piece for a community psychology magazine later that month. I Set Boundaries and I'm Not Sorry was the title. Thousands read it in a few days. Others emailed while others left comments. One statement was repeated repeatedly as several people sobbed. Thank you. You are the reason I finally said no. I didn't write this to embarrass anyone. I wrote for those who, like me, had mistaken love for sacrifice and were brought up to think that devotion meant remaining mute in the face of brokenness. I had been described as uncaring, egotistical, and frigid by the folks I used to donate my last money to, not by strangers, and I finally got it. Now, being kind means not allowing others to harm you. Family is not a justification for cruelty, and love is not a kind of financial servitude. Nothing was destroyed by me. I just sketched the boundary, and life brought me to individuals who appreciated who I was once I finally let go of those who just appreciated what I had to offer. Maya, Helen, Liam, and Ryan. The people that messaged me were strangers, the readers who identified with what I wrote. I had finally matured into a woman who recognized her value, replacing the little girl inside of me who was constantly seeking acceptance. And I'll smile and respond, I didn't just survive. If someone asks me what I learned from all of this today, I took back my name and made the unapologetic decision to choose peace. Please remember to like the video if this tale resonated with you or brought up memories of something personal. Leave a comment below and subscribe to receive weekly updates on more inspiring true life tales. We are able to elevate more voices like Olivia's because to your support,